Hey everybody, Kason Morris here, and welcome to another episode of Kason Morris Learnings, where we talk about everything related to life, work, and legacy. This is episode 8 for us. Really exciting episode. This is a recap, and we're recapping ideas and content that we talked about over the last 3 weeks, all about how do you go about designing your work. And with this episode, this is the Design for Life model that I talk about at the top of every episode. And the model essentially grounds us in this idea that, you work on your life and what you love and live for, your work and what you can do and get paid for, and your legacy, which is what you leave behind for yourself and others. And as I mentioned, we talked about work in this last 3 weeks. And I'm really excited with the fourth episode today because what I like to do with the fourth episode of each segment is invite a guest. And I have the pleasure of inviting Matt Doan to Kason Morris Learnings. How you doing today, buddy?
Glad to be here, man. So excited.
Man, it's really a pleasure to have you on today. And our goal here right now is we're talking to people about, are they ready to break free? How do they go about doing something better with the 9 to 5 grind and making sure that they're crafting more fulfilling lives and futures. And this is something that you're dialed into, Matt. I really evangelize, and what I wanted to do was just bring people back to what I talked about over the past couple of weeks, and then let's just jump into it and have a conversation around these topics. So in relation to your work, I look at it in 3 big buckets. I talked about this idea of capital and how you build career capital, and this idea of skills as your currency. And then I talked about leverage. So once you have those skills and you add experiences to that, you're able to create leverage, which are your assets. And that's ultimately leading you to this idea of autonomy, which is what I talked about last week, and career designing for autonomy so you can create freedom in your work. And the end goal for me in the way I talk about these things, Matt, is this idea of creating agency. So I would love to hear your point of view on that.
We all deeply crave agency and freedom. We use different words sometimes, but at our soul, we as human beings are wired for wanting to do what we want to do. Now, the conditions for that aren't always good in modern society, right? Because as you know, the story is when you start plugging in at age 5, going through the school system, starting picking paths, choosing a default path, and then start being successful based on what others have done before you, you suddenly lose all freedom. You lose your say, you lose your agency because you feel these hidden pressures, these invisible scripts are running your life, right? Describing what is success. And then your own wants, your own desires, your own notions of freedom fade away, and you stop even dreaming about that. So it comes to a point after many people say you're like 10 to 15 years in a career, very common scenario, Kason, that I know you and I both see, is people go, holy crap, this does not feel free. This does not feel like me being an individual thriving in modern society. And you have this freak out moment. And then I think it's that time where you say, what do I do? I'm sure we could
Right.
just dissect that a bit more, but that's generally the storyline.
No, I think it's spot on, and that's why I try to deconstruct it to sort of reprogram folks and get them to understand this is how you build back into creating that agency and freedom. And that's why I start with that front end, which is that idea of skills being currency. So to me, career capital is that idea. It's from Cal Newport. It's referring to your skills that are rare and valuable and can be used as leverage for ultimately defining your work and even outside of work. So I'm really curious about your thoughts on the idea of skills being the new currency for helping people create that journey of freedom for them now.
It's the ultimate currency. And a lot of people, I think, tie their skills and therefore their currency to what others ask of them. So they say, I'm a marketing professional or I'm a designer. And that's all they give themselves credit for with their skills, but their skills are so much more than that. It's also their worldviews, their experiences, their unique interests. When you fuse that together, Kason, as you know, you are uniquely one of one, right? Like an NFT, you're the only one of its kind in existence. But too many people tie themselves to some label, some title, and skills. I like to expand that to that full set of experiences and raw material you have as an
Yep.
individual and embrace that.
Yeah, no, no, spot on. And that's why it segues to the point around that next segment for me, where I talk about how value experiences create leverage. So it's like you have the skills, but to your point, the skills belong to you, essentially, and you're creating a win-win with who you work for or work with. But when you start to think about the value of those skills and those experiences and the knowledge, that's where you're able to create leverage, which steps you, a little bit closer to that idea of freedom as you define it in your work, and then also outside of your work. So that's why I go from skills as that currency to moving to how do you use that currency through valuable experiences to start to create leverage to unplug yourself and unlock yourself again.
Hmm. Well, I have a thought there, but I'm curious, Kason, when you think about using leverage to create assets, what does that look like in your mind?
So for me, the idea of using leverage to create assets is like, well, depending on how you work and what you want to do in your work. Like say you want more time or you want more flexibility as an example. What I call essentially the experience piece is you get the at bats and you're providing value to your employer or who you work with, and that gives you credits. And that's why your skills, because they trust you in your ability to execute, that allows you more freedom to go about doing things in the way that you want to do them. So I dial this back when I speak with people and I talk about their career journeys and the different skills that they've built along the way. And what I find is that most people are usually sitting on a war chest of experiences and opportunities that they don't realize that they can use as leverage for wherever they are now or for what they want to do next. So when you start thinking about your experiences in that way, it's like going to the bank to spend it so that you can start to do more of the things you want to do in your work.
It makes me think about my time back in corporate. I was there for 15 years, and we have this thought process in our head which says, I'm not allowed to leverage my skills outside of the four walls of this enterprise because that would be wrong. I might get in trouble.
Yep.
And the way I think about it now is a few things. One, what a disservice that is to the people that need your skills and impact. All the people you cannot help because you have that belief. Belief is simply something you've believed to be true, right? You can test that, you can push that boundary. Clearly, you've seen others do it. And you know you're meant for so much more, and you have leverage where you can create personal freedom by bringing your skills to the outside world, whether that's pro bono, whether that's starting a business, whether it's just helping a friend, putting content online. But instead, we just assume we must keep it within the four walls of this enterprise. And then that's when you kind of die inside because you know it's wrong. You know that's not what you're meant to be. And you're meant to help others and get your return for it too. Because I love the saying that the money you earn is just a measuring stick for the value you create in this world. And what a shame
Yeah.
if you're not testing that.
No, I do love that. I feel like when you start to position yourself from a value perspective, all those other things that you feel are wants, they just do start to happen. So I really really love that point. And then like just rounding out to that last segment, when I think about, I framed it in the model as autonomy, but it's really a correlation to what I call career design, and being able to create your work freedom. And as you know, Matt, I talk a lot about design thinking and how it's transformed the way I approach my executive work and the way I've approached my career, my corporate career over the last 15 years, just designing and iterating and experimenting each way forward. And through those experiments, it really informed my perspective. It helped me build new and different and diverse skills. And going back to the point that we were just talking about, the created the leverage because I had a variety of skills that created value, not for only those that I worked for, but for myself and those that I cared about. And which allowed me to really diversify how I give value to the world beyond the walls of just, the 9 to 5 role. So I'm a real big advocate of this idea that your career is yours and you are ultimately the designer of it. And once you realize you have that ability to design, that's where the freedom key really unlocks, and you're able to escape the matrix because you're doing work aligned to your values.
It makes me think about a very simple equation I've been working through with some of my clients. Directional aim plus experimental mindset equals
Mm,
exponential growth. And where do you learn that growing up in school or even in 9 to 5 environments? It's usually fit within this box because these are the checklist items that you're going to be deemed successful on. And while that creates value, you're going to grow. The organization is going to benefit from it. It's so limiting. But when you give yourself permission to not just thrive within a box, but actually expand that box on your terms so that you're doing something that lights you up and excites you and creates impact in this world, that's where you start feeling free, autonomous, because you're no longer just playing by someone else's rules. And this is not being a rebellious person just for the sake of it. It's about like you were put on this earth to do some really great things. Give yourself that chance. Be brave.
right. No, right on. I mean, it's that whole idea that I think people don't realize is that it's ownership. You own it. It's your personal life. You're creating a path that aligns to your values and goals. And sometimes I think when we go into our work, or even when we go into our lives outside of work, we give away that sense of ownership. And this is why I do this work, because it's really about taking some of that back.
Yeah. It's an interesting time, kind of post COVID, and you see Gen Z and their value system. There's this workforce movement from the bottom up, which says autonomy, individuality, freedom. Like it can succeed even in a 9 to 5 environment. I think the whole
Yeah.
9 to 5 construct of top down leadership fit within the box is exploding in front of our eyes. And it's the leaders that are embracing this and understanding it and working with it versus rebelling it. That's going to create a lot of new work experiences, fulfilling work experiences for both leaders and junior workforce.
Yeah, I know. I fully agree. I think we're in a world where the expectations are a little bit different. Like, you think about our gig economy and all the things that we do. I think corporates are moving toward that world of how do we do this inside the organization, where you're not just tied to a role or a level, but they really value you based on your skills and experience. And the organizations that are at the forefront of reimagining themselves and their infrastructure to support those ideas will definitely thrive and attract that top talent, because, you know, frankly, work doesn't define you, but work is a part of life. And I said this in the last episode. We spend around 85 to 125,000 hours working. So you got to ask yourself a real good question. Like, what do you want to do with that time? Is that time aligned to your values and your goals? And once you start to take back ownership of that, it becomes a multiplier. And that's where that true freedom and that holistic understanding of, I even like your tagline, Matt, in your branding, that the idea of being uncaged, because when we think about our work lives, we think of them often as a box, and but you can move within that box with a sense of freedom. So I would love for you to just dial into a little bit more about how did you get to that idea of being uncaged, how it related to your story and what you're doing now with your business and platform.
Sure. So it's a very personal story. I spent the first 10 years of my life finding all my self worth in my job. That's what I had seen before me, both in family and colleagues. I looked up at my bosses and said, they're giving their all. Surely this is what I do, right? I had a wife and 3 young kids at home. I was like, this is where I'm meant to be and give value in this world. 10 years go by, stuff hits the fan, things fall apart. right? Like my life came crashing down. I got divorced, stopped seeing my kids as much as I'd like to. My health went to crap. It was a really big reckoning moment, largely, not all, but largely because I gave so much of my self-worth and my identity into this corporate world. It didn't have any of my own design in place, right? So looking back at that, I use a shorthand language to say I was trapped in the corporate cage. And a cage, it was just something I said yes to. They opened the door, they welcomed me in, I jumped in and I closed the door on myself, right? That's what I was doing. And I had the keys to my freedom all along. And what I learned over the next few years, Kason, when I was still in corporate, was that I could create freedom right where I was. I actually created my own designs for how I was going to show up at work, the things that mattered to me most outside of work. And I stopped giving needless energy and times to things that didn't need my attention. So I minimized the amount of hours I was spending at work. I was super surgical on giving the right outcomes. I still got promoted, rewarded. They said, "Hey, Matt, you're a great leader." All those things still happened for me. And I had this time and energy to be the father I needed to be healthier. I started building a side business, which eventually led to me becoming a full-time entrepreneur by taking this design that was in my head, challenging the assumptions and making it work. It was entirely possible. And I call that living uncaged.
I love it. It's such a powerful story, and it resonates with me. In relation to the idea of crafting forward to figure out your definition of what's next and building toward that ideal future self. So I appreciate your transparency and your vulnerability in that. Chris, I'm curious in our audience. We have Matt here, who is definitely a life design expert and has made his way in unlocking himself and has helped others. Are there any questions, comments, or thoughts on these ideas? Maybe some things that we could answer. I would love to give people an opportunity to ask Matt questions, ask myself questions in relation to this idea of designing work and some of our experiences.
It is a little quiet today. It's a little cricket today. It's a little shy. I don't know why. Yeah, no one in here. But hopefully they'll get that question, and like the lag will catch up and we'll get some people asking some questions. But so far, you guys have been ebbing and flowing really well. I love the conversation, dropping some gems, some red pills, as Matt was saying.
Mhm.
No, this is awesome. This is all
So,
really great.
so
Um,
Matt, I have a really important question about what you mentioned in relation to your story. This idea of building time freedom and how you were able to craft your 9 to 5 work to create more time for yourself. I think that's really valuable for a lot of folks. I know people that I speak with really struggle with that overwhelm of work taking over, outside of even the 9 to 5 hours.
Yeah. There's two ways of answering that. There's the practical way that I created time, and then there's the experiential element of time. The practical element was you could start very blank slate. I do this with all my coaching clients. 7-day week, sheet of
Mhm.
paper. In a perfect world, constraints removed, your reality removed. How do you want to prioritize the most important things in your life? So, when are you spending time with family? When are you doing self care? When are you nourishing your mind, your body, doing things that light you up? Place those things at the right times of the calendar, right? And then start asking yourself, for the most critical outcomes I produce at work, where do those events, those items show up? Again, much more per my design, not per someone else's design. And then how do you create a lot of open space by default permanently? That is the
Mm,
task, not to ever let yourself get open for hits. Don't be that person that has an open calendar and someone just throws stuff on your calendar. Like an executive, be a boss, take control of your calendar, make sure that you own it, right? Because you can then say, I'm going to do my deep work here, right? To use Cal Newport again. This is where our
right.
most creative, critical things happen. I'm not going to let an 8 a.m. stand up destroy my deep work flow session when I can do amazing work then, right? So the practical element is design it and then do the hard work behind the scenes, to work with other people to make it work, delete, move things around, and so on. That's the practical element. And then there's the experiential element of time. And this is where Einstein comes in, right? Everyone perceives time and space differently. If you're running around with like a chicken with its head cut off, and your calendar looks like Skittles vomited all over your calendar, and you're just like back to back to back to back, trying to fit life in. And then every time you got a kid's soccer game, you bolt it in at the end of the day, and then you're starting workday number 2 at 10 p.m. Are you kidding me? Time is going to fly by, right?
Right.
But it's like Einstein said, you meet that partner on a first date and you're embracing with them, time slows down, right? Things slow
Right.
down. It's immersive. And then you got to ask yourself, how am I putting things in my week that are nourishing, that are slowing me down, that I'm there in the moments with the people that matter most in my life? So it's about the practical, and then feeding that calendar with things that nourish you and slow down time.
Wow. You said so much, and I really appreciate that. I can relate. It's an ebb and flow. Like you're always revisiting it and how to optimize it. One of the call outs for me and the way I think about it is to your point around finding your flow states where you can do your best work is also the power of understanding energy management and where you have the most energy or the least energy, and using that in conjunction with the idea of what kind of work best fits at those times will allow you to get the most out of it. So I really really enjoy and appreciate your point of view there, and it actually makes me think about another question based on what we've talked about so far, where you mentioned your transition from optimizing and maximizing your leadership work, starting your side business, if you will, helping others. That makes me think about the idea of monetizing your gifts, because you alluded to that earlier, and I would love for you to talk a little bit about what you think that means for workers of today and how they can start doing that.
I love that. One thing I just want to put a pin on the previous energy piece that you said. It made me
Mhm.
think that everyone craves time freedom and wants time freedom. Time is the most important currency. I'd level up and say, to your point, Case, on that energy is the most important currency. Because even if you have all the time in the world, if you aren't using your best energy and cultivating that energy wisely, what's the point?
Mm.
Right? You're not using it in ways that are actually productive and fulfilling. So energy over time. Now, to answer your question around monetizing gifts, you can hear this in different ways, right? You've got this unique capital, you've got gifts, you have this zone of genius that you're in, right? Unique ability. There's different ways of packaging it, but it's that one of one thing where you have this very specific set of skills, experiences, worldviews, things that light you up and you're passionate about. And there are many people in this world, and do not discount this. There are many people in this world that would gladly pay for that. The value you have. Now, say you're 10 years into your career right now, right? You say, I'm not that far in. Who would pay for this stuff? It's just my thoughts, my skills. Well, think about the person 3 or 4 years behind you that
Right.
looks to you as their hero and says, oh my God, they're so far ahead. You might see yourself as only a few steps ahead, but you're very, very valuable to them, as opposed to that person's hero that's 20 years ahead. That's like light years. They can't even talk to each other. It's so disparate. It's so far apart. You are the one that can help them take the next few steps, and you embrace that and you test that and you start making little offers to the world, talking to the people you're best meant to serve. And my suggestion there, without unpacking everything, is go find your past self. You know that person so well. You know how they think, how they feel, what they want. There are thousands of your previous self out in the world. Connect with them, make offers to them, learn what they're feeling, experiencing, and wanting, and you have the buds of a business right there.
Wow. No, that's super powerful. The idea of connecting with your past self, because to your point, there are a few people who are a few steps behind you, and you can help accelerate them by creating that connection, and that in turn is where you, to your point, where you add value, and you can potentially definitely monetize your gifts. And I don't even think of monetizing as in just money based currency, just having communities of practice, other people that relate to your journey and can push forward and maybe, help them mitigate some of the mistakes and challenges that, you went through. I'm a big believer of you can never follow anyone else's path, but you can gain perspective. And then, you take those lessons and you contextualize them. They can definitely help you accelerate to where you want to go. So
Mhm.
really, really super powerful stuff. Um,
Yeah. One thing, if I might add on that, when you're going, some people get caught up on monetizing. It feels slimy. Like, why would I monetize? I'm not worthy of monetizing. Here's the point. This is tapping into human psychology. Say you're finding someone, your past self is 5 years behind you, right? You want them to make massive transformation in the world. You see it in them. They want it. If you come up with, say, daily social media posts and that's all you're throwing out there, my friend, that's just giving them band-aids. They need
mm,
surgery. If they're going to make a massive change in the world, they need the psychological commitment. And that commitment takes skin in the game. And when
right.
you say this is a monetary transaction, one, it incentivizes you, but it also incentivizes them because now they're focused, they're dedicated, they've put forward money. They're going to put time and energy into it too. Then there's a much greater chance of their transformation taking place. If you're just throwing out band-aids, like I love social media stuff, right? Don't get me wrong, the free newsletters and podcasts, but it's just band-aids out in the universe. Some people just need band-aids, but if you need surgery, that requires skin in the game. And you, as the provider, the supplier, whatever you want to call yourself, you owe it to them and yourself to require that transaction for their life to improve.
Yeah. No, I relate to that. I encapsulate that idea is when you pay money, you pay attention. And we are in an attention deficit economy where everyone consumes information, and it's not always good information. So I'm very big on the diet you choose, and when you're willing to align, like you said, skin in the game, and put some monetary investment in yourself, that's when you dial in, and you're more likely to start to move forward. So I'm 1,000% with you on that. I invest in myself regularly, on a yearly basis, through coaching and community and certifications, whatever I think will help with my continuous iteration of my designs. Yep, I'm so with you on that.
Oof, hold on real quick. I just need to do a little air horn for that. That was definitely well warranted. That was heavy. Thank you guys for that.
No worries, no worries. Well, we're nearing the half of the hour, closing things out, and I really appreciate you, Matt, and all you're doing, and your energy behind your mission and purpose. I feel it feels like, we're sort of like spirit animals in just in relation to the vigor toward helping people craft and build their ways forward. I would love to give you the last couple minutes, for the audience that's here. You know, anything you want them to take away in relation to this idea of designing your work as a mode of creating your freedom and uncaging and getting out of the matrix, all the kinds of narratives that just resonate, with what we've talked about today.
Yeah. First off, thanks for having me, Kason. I've loved our back and forth. I appreciate our friendship and our spirit animal guided mission together. This is really powerful. The simplest way I can pack all this together and speak to someone right now is that, especially for high achievers out there, I work with people that are working like director level on up in corporate organizations. They're super successful on paper. Okay. And the
Yeah.
thing that got them there was leading with their head, making all the smart risk management decisions, go to this school, take that job, do a lateral move over here, get the speaking position. And they've got all these options, these life options, right? And the problem is they're never cashing in those life options. They're deferring life. They're not actually living in a way that feels good. And that's because they're completely ignoring their heart. So what I'd say right now is if you're in a little bit of pain and you're questioning, like, what's next? I'm not comfortable where I am. That's because you've been living too much with your heart, with your head, my friend. We need to start listening more to our heart. That's that inner voice. You know what it is. It shows up in different ways. You feel it in your body. It comes out in emotional conversations with your family and friends and coworkers. You've got to start listening to that, taking chances on that, and stop just playing it safe on particular pathways, but asking yourself, what will make my future self proud if I took this bet? Maybe it's changing career paths. Maybe it's building a side business. Maybe it's taking a 6-month sabbatical to get out of worker mode, as Paul Millard often describes. What does it even feel like to be out of worker mode as an adult, and seeing who you are and exploring yourself? You might say, oh, I can't afford not to have a salary. I'm like, really test that. Really see what you're capable of. Because if you create the space and start listening to your heart, you might unlock paths that you've never even fathomed, that are exponentially more rewarding financially, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, all that stuff, if you give yourself that space. So transition just from your head and start playing more with the heart too, and you're going to be unstoppable.
Wow. I love it. That really really drives home. Matt, thank you so much for everyone joining. I just wanted to bring the model back up to show what we've covered and what we're going into next week. So far over the last 2 months, we've covered the life segment and what are the things that you love and live for, and how can you go toward building that. We just wrapped up this very very exciting segment on your work, and Matt dropped some real gems on us about how you can go about doing that and really leading with your heart, especially from a place of experience. Now, going into the next couple of weeks, we're going to start to talk a little bit more about your legacy. And I have a very unique point of view around that, because it's about what you leave behind for yourself and others. So it's not just about leaving it behind, it's about living it now. And I think what you're hearing from us today is an element of how we each choose to start and leave our legacy with you all through content, through sharing this high value information. And I really look forward to bringing you all to the next episode of Kason Morris Learnings. Matt, thank you again. I really, really appreciate your time, and I appreciate everything you do. And I look forward to having you on again, and to future collaborations.
Thank you.
Hey,
Love your mission, brother.
hey, really quickly, I just wanted to say we got some love from YouTube, from Alice Hernandez, just what she needed. So
Nice, nice.
awesome. Thank you. Happy we could help. Also, I just wanted to call attention. If anyone wants to get to know more about Matt, you can find his information here. It is matthewdoan.com. There you go. Likewise with Kason over here, if you want to put time on his calendar, please feel free to do so via the QR code down below. And yeah, I think that is all of the house to-dos. You
Nice.
guys all good to
Appreciate you.
sign off? All right.
Appreciate you, Chris, for keeping us honest, and your production as always. And we'll see you guys in the next week, maybe next couple of weeks. So more to come. But looking forward to the next episode.
Awesome. Awesome. Bye, guys.